All right, we're going to start now into understanding how to wake up from the Rave cartography perspective. You might have heard me saying all kinds of things about waking up, understanding how we are passengers, observing and witnessing this life. We are passengers in a vehicle. The body is rented. It is not ours. It is something we are here to witness, to watch, this one precious life of this body, this vehicle. Yes, the witnesser, the passenger within the vehicle, has an opportunity to reincarnate life after life in many different forms, not just human. But this one vehicle, this body that you live in, this precious spaceship as we travel along together through time and space, this is the one chance it has to live its life. And so that signpost of you operating out of integrity with your design, bitterness, anger, disappointment, frustration, those are big red stop signs that are showing you you're living out of integrity with what your design is here for. You don't have access to your spirit because these are dualities, the this and the that of your vehicle, the generality of the thematic of what is going to happen when you don't live according to your own nature. Those frequencies of not feeling like you're being seen, valued, appreciated, resentment, i.e. bitterness for the projector, or the frequency of showing up so freaking frustrated that it's a constant, never-ending companion, and you get to this deep place of even rage, perhaps, because you are not in alignment, that frequency. And the frequency of anger, this deep, penetrating anger, that pervasive anger that gets to under your skin and it festers in or explodes out. That anger is showing you this is not the way. That disappointment in life, for those of you who are reflectors, that disappointment in life itself, that deep, 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 pervasive disappointment is not you. None of that is you. Those frequencies are coming from what is consistent about you. In the manifester, it is the energy that is here to make an impact in life. That's where the anger is coming from, because it's showing you, the body is showing you, it's speaking to you, stop, you're going the wrong way. The projector, the projector who is here to have the sweetness of success, be able to be contributed to those around them so that they can align to the highest potential for not only themselves, but particularly those that they work with, and those that they nurture, those that they care for, those that they advise and guide. That sweetness of success is the spirit, the essence of the spirit that arises inside of you when you have an opportunity to be seen and recognized for what your true gifts are. It's a natural consequence of operating correctly. Just like the piece of being able to inform in order to impact is the natural expression of the spirit of the manifester. And my generator friends, for those of you who are generative in your frequency, and that's most of the planet, 76%, I believe, or 67% of the planet are generative, and they're walking around continually compromising the integrity of their energy resource and not doing what they love, not allowing themselves to live the fullest expression of what they were born for, which is to build our world, to do the doing that is satisfying. And that satisfaction is the essence of their spirit alighting the world. That's what you're here for if you're a generator. You cannot compromise the integrity of your vehicle without degradation to the vehicle. And this is why so many people go, well, wait a minute, I thought I was a generator type and I have lots of energy. Everybody's telling me I'm supposed to have all this energy, but I've got a burnt out thyroid and I'm exhausted all the time. What gives? It's because you're not listening to your body. The body is the life. The body knows what's best. The body has its navigation system, and these simple signposts, they're not bad or wrong when they show up. They're just like signs, flashing lights. You know, when you're driving down the freeway and you've got these bumps on the side of the road where you have, the car start to jitter because you're actually starting to go off into danger zone. Frustration, anger, bitterness, disappointment, those are all the bumps on the side of the road. Now, in the beginning of the human design experiment, as a passenger, as a witness to observing this life, you are going to find yourself, if you've been living deeply conditioned and deeply believing the mind inside of your head, i.e. the not self, you're going to find yourself observing bitterness, rage, anger, frustration, disappointment more often than not if you're very deeply conditioned. If that is the case, do not lose hope. Don't worry, it gets better. Now, for some of us, it's easier than others. And the work of a human design analyst is to help you get in touch with the core of you. And the work of a Living Your Design guide is to guide you through that process that the human design analyst started with you. Now, one of the things that changed as we move forward into 2027, and I became a Living Your Design guide, I wasn't an analyst yet, I saw how limiting it was, that the requirements to go into guide the Living Your Design program to wake people up was that you had to have a reading first. And I actually invited the industry to change that. And what happened was I recognized that so many more people now come into the core of the spiritual program in human design, which is Living Your Design, without necessarily knowing all the details of their design. So they have lots of questions. Well, what about this detail? What about that detail? Don't get lost in the details. In cartography, we're going to dive deeper into details, and remember that we're looking at thematics that are in general. And you, in your uniqueness, is a combination, a coalescing of all kinds of energies. And the only way the human mind can pick this apart is to look at the details one by one. But you are not that. You are so much more than what you see on that piece of paper. Don't get caught up in the details. Here's what Laveena did in the very beginning of human design. Looked at that design and went, oh my God, poor me, why me? Why do I have the design that I have? And why does it show up like it is? And it was really, really painful because, hello, Moon. I believed my mind's story because my mind always said, there's something wrong with me. What's wrong with me, says the not self, third line, that's pessimistic about its process. I have to tell you, there's nothing, utterly nothing wrong with you. Right here, right now, nothing. No matter what you think, it's nothing. It is nothing. It's simply conditioning. The mind is a beautiful thing. How do we wake up? How do we have passenger consciousness? We witness what is happening in the body, and we love it unconditionally, no matter what. No matter what the mind thinks, no matter the story that it's telling you, no matter what. And I'm hopeful that that inspires you a little bit from my path and my observations of what happens in this human design experiment, is that people tend to think that they are still seven-centered, even though they might not even know what that means. They still think that they are the thoughts inside of their head. And please, that is a consequence of what happened when we were seven-centered and all of the energy went up to the Ajna. Okay? You are not that anymore. The Ajna seven-centered vehicle, Ajna awareness, was focused on controlling its environment, controlling through its thoughts. The Kundalini energy rising up that middle core column to get to, this mind's process and try to escape being in form. Yeah? Ignoring the form. The people who, didn't value being embodied in the form. That's not us. The time is now to be embodied as a spirit consciousness. We are developing our spirit awareness, our unity consciousness, our oneness consciousness, our aspect of us being still a differentiated aspect of the whole, but being able to know our emotional intelligence within that place of the whole, to be comfortable riding around in a vehicle that is not ours. It is something that we're witnessing, we're watching. So to let go of control through your mind takes a lot of trust, a lot of guts. It takes a lot of courage to let go of that story you've been telling yourself and you tell everybody else about what's wrong with you or what's wrong with somebody else. There's nothing wrong. I guess that's my message for today, because I got a little triggered earlier and I posted it in the Human Design System group. There's nothing wrong with you. What happens in design is that we see it's a dualistic system. It's everything has a this and a that. So understanding our centers and their defined or undefined aspects of how they show up in a healthy or an unhealthy state, you began that journey in living your design. As I take you through, I'm going to show you deeper how you can relate to the energy vortices that are physically within you, building the body that you inhabit. These centers are energetic vortices that draw energy in and transmit energy out based on the definition. So they're transmitting when it's defined, when it's colored in. Those centers are fixed in their transmission when it's colored in. Yeah, before you were born, you had an imprint from the unconscious activations that made up your physical form. And when you were born, you had another imprint that imprinted your soul, this particular witness passenger consciousness. And together they create either definition or not. In a rare 1.5% of us, they don't create definition, but most of us are transmitting a consistent frequency that's either healthy or unhealthy, fixed in its healthiness or fixed in its unhealthiness. The unhealthiness is what happens when you make decisions with the openness rather than receiving. When you're undefined, when you're open, you're here to receive, you're here to learn, you're here to grow. This is your innate wisdom potential. Okay, that's where you're flexible. And I'm hopeful that this is not new to you. It's a review. I want to make sure that I start off cartography with everyone on the same page. So I'm going to go through a few more mechanical things and back to more inspiration on waking up. Gates, when you find them in the design, can be conscious or unconscious. These are active centers on the left. These are dormant centers on the right. So the unconscious is anything in red. What you're unconscious of, what you have no conscious access to until out it pops. Or somebody else says, hey, did you know you're like this? And you hear that so many times they go, oh my God, that must be me because everybody keeps saying I'm like this. Now the conscious aspect of you is your witness consciousness. It shows the imprint of your personality. So we have an unconscious and we have a conscious. When you're in not self and you're making decisions from the inconsistencies in the design, and you're identifying with the conditioning and you're using that as a strategy to get your needs met or to prove your value and your worth, whatever it happens to be, when you make decisions from the openness, that leads to the creation of a conditioned mind, the not self behavior that shows up so predictably when we have any aspect of these centers inconsistent and you make a decision, that becomes the quote-unquote not self. Now, when you have an activation that's there, it doesn't mean that that's not you and that you ignore that aspect of you. It means that that's your wisdom potential, where the true quote-unquote not you is where you take in others, is any place where you have a totally open channel, okay? totally open channel, or a gate activation. Maybe you have a 5 like I do on one side. I have a 5. But the 15, the extremist, I'm not that. And that, my friends, is where your mind thinks, I have to be that. If you have one aspect on one side and you don't have the other, the conditioned mind is lodged there. And here in this context, it will get frustrated when it makes decisions out of integrity with its design. So there's two aspects to this. Okay, the consistency of, as an example, my design, 4130 and 18, is I'm going to show up bitter if I'm not aligned with my own authority. I'm going to be resentful. I'm going to be deeply, almost to the point where I want to withdraw from life because I don't want to feel this feeling anymore because I am so deeply disempowered. That's the body's experience of being disempowered. And that's bitterness, adrenalized bitterness, so deep it becomes resentful. Okay, that's the consistency. But what happens when you're undefined and you have activations, I have a lot of these here, that are going to hook into the world of the generator? Then you run around trying to make decisions to be a part of the generative frequency, and you get frustrated and amplify the exhaustion too. So it's not to say that you can't experience all of these different frequencies of misalignment. You can, especially when you're living from the not self. Okay, so I hope that that concept is clear. There is a conditioning field that we are bombarded by day in and day out. Day in and day out, the global transit, the frequency of the background that conditions our whole population in our eras, our global cycles, as Ra calls them, the eras of our times. That is always present. And that we call the not self, because it is so pervasive and so oppressive sometimes and so never ending. We can't escape it. We can't shield ourselves from conditioning. So what happens is, underneath the way the mind frames decision making are all of these reasons to make a decision. So when it comes to decision making right now for the next, June? The next 5 months, you can watch as your mind is going to cycle through the same damn problem over and over and over again, like worrying a bone. You're staying up late, you can't sleep because your mind is pressured to discover the answers to the big why in the sky and become aware, because you're afraid of ignorance. You have a fear of ignorance. 24 is fear of ignorance. 61 is inner truth. So you're going to think about the same thing, perhaps something that doesn't matter to you really, over and over and over again. And that's the transit. And boom, you make a decision because of what you think you know. That's where we start to have thinking about things that don't matter, trying to answer everybody else's questions, pretending to be certain instead of being open-minded, if this is open for you. Okay? So the strategies of thinking about things that don't matter, pretending to be certain, trying to prove, avoiding confrontation, not knowing when enough is enough, looking around, running for identity, love, and direction, trying to be safe and ensure your security so you hold on to things that aren't good for you, trying to hurry up because you're under so much pressure and you feel like you're already behind and you have to get it faster, 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 more, 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 because you want to attract attention. That's always going to be there, and I'm sorry to say, but we're all adults. It's continually happening all the time. This knowledge is for you to teach your kids, and I so hope for those of you that have kids that you have the capacity to teach them this, because it will really, really help as they move forward, as we all move forward into the future. With true self-behavior, your open centers are not blind genetic imperatives. They're specific learning programs, places to develop wisdom. So the potential wisdom that we learn through not identifying with making decisions from the openness in the design helps us learn how to be an outer authority for others. So the term outer authority is used in design for two things: There's people who have outer authority, like our mental projectors, who are very specifically designed to provide outer authority for others, but anybody can be an outer authority. Where you can have wisdom potential is any place in an undefined function. That undefined function gives you the capacity to learn real wisdom if you do not make decisions, personal decisions from your mind's process. But we think we have control. And the key to waking up is that surrendering to the body's process rather than suffering because of what your mind thinks, trying to mentally masturbate to make things different than what they are, is one of the ways that you can let go. Let go of the mental masturbation. Let go of the trying to have the knowing be something that you're absolutely, utterly certain about. There's a scientific fact from what neuroscience has studied that what we think, say, do, and initiate is it starts long before our neocortex, which is an aspect of the brain. Awareness happens in the deep gray areas of the brain milliseconds before we are consciously aware of the thoughts that we think. So ajna awareness, the key to waking up, ajna is reactive. It's not creative, it's reactive. It comes after a really long chain of biochemical processes take place without our conscious awareness. So there's a link in the presentation, should you choose to continue, that I will give you access to. It says what neuroscience says about free will. We're convinced that it exists, but new research suggests it might be nothing more than a trick the brain plays on itself. So that's one of the things just to be curious about, just to have open-mindedness about, that we don't know all the answers. We don't know how the brain really works. The key is to allow yourself to align to the body, surrender to the form. And what is so powerful and pervasive, I like that word today, pervasive, as a conditioning field, is the not self certainty of the ajna with its black and white thinking, its measuring and comparing. It's always the heart and soul of the dilemma of anybody who wants to wake up, because biologically these are the pituitary glands, and they're biochemically connected to every other center in your body. So the mind is a spokesperson for every other center in your body that is undefined, and will convince you by repeating itself over and over and over again, well, what they said and what they did means this, and you better do this so that you can, whatever, get whatever it is that you want. Because your mind wants to make decisions based on mental strategies it developed through its relationship with the open centers. In the openness is where you develop true wisdom. But when you were a child, nobody taught you correctly. So what happened in your openness is where you were wounded. And how do we resolve the wound of abandonment as an undefined splenic child? Hi, that's me. That abandonment wound, cling on to anything you think is going to bring you security. And that even, means people that aren't good for you. You're raised by an abusive parent that ran around on rages and threw things and broke things, and you think that's love. So you hold on to things that are not good for you because your mind says, I can't divorce him. We've got to stay together for the kids. I've got to be a good mother. Maybe if we go to therapy, it'll be okay. The mind cannot be your inner authority. It's too polluted with not only information, but experiences. So these giant, overarching keynotes of what happens in an undefined center, if you can learn to recognize your own individual, quote unquote, not self, your mind's conditioned processes, its adaptive strategies to the pain and the suffering of conditioning. If you can learn to observe that, it makes it a little easier to understand why it's so important to wait for response, to wait for invitation, to wait for initiation, to inform in order to impact. So I really want to invite you to know these now. Know these now. Because what can happen is when you start to recognize the words flying out of your mouth, trying to prove or improve yourself, trying to maintain control, trying to deliver, trying to be the best, trying to be competitive, when it's not your trip, the more you recognize that happening, the easier it becomes to release the mind's hold on your decision making. And you can't fix the conditioning from the awareness, but you can at least observe the pain and the suffering with compassion. And I can tell you that makes a huge amount of difference. So what happens when you have an open center occupied with questions that don't matter to you, those things that really do matter are ignored because they don't attract you. Genetically, it's not an imperative. Now we're releasing the genetic imperative to bond with radically different people, and we're more aligning to people of like frequency, because it's not about the reproduction game anymore. It's about aligning to the frequency of authenticity and awareness and aligned behavior and compassion for the human condition, because none of us can escape it. None of us can escape the way the mind works. Those of us who are adults, we have been raised with that genetic imperative and that openness and bond with what is different. Okay, reproduction is the first law of the seven-centered being, that seven-centered being that exploded, and our population just exploded so that we could individuate and differentiate, go forth and multiply, was the law. Okay, personally, it's never personal when we try to bond with something that's different. It's about the genetic imperative that is the product of us being the kind of species that we are, and that's the conditioning from the seven-centered homogenized life. Sameness was a dead-end street. Diversity is attractive to the genes. Your body is the one that needed to reproduce. Now, those of us who are projectors, those of us who are reflectors, those of us who are manifestors, we don't have consistent access to reproduction. That's not our trip. We can get conditioned to that. So watch what happens when your body is with another. Watch the body. Be aware of the body. Witness the body. Do not punish yourself for being attracted to what you are or who you are not. The wisdom of what happens when you're recognizing yourself, you're aware of yourself. What happens is you're going to be hyper aware in the openness, receptive and adaptive to wherever you have openness in the design. And when you learn something truly of value, you're going to be able to contribute it as an awareness, a feeling, or an inspiration. I wanted to say insight, but that's not true for me. It's about a knowing. So I have a potential wisdom for you in any of my open centers. You have a potential wisdom for me in any of those open centers. So long as we engage each other in alignment with our authority, so surrendering to the body, attracting to us those who resonate with our frequency. Like vibration attracts the like vibration, so that we can commune together as nine-centered beings. And that's our trip as a nine-centered being, communing in order to grow. Our unique differentiated perspective is utterly different from anyone else on the planet. It's not designed to be homogenized. Okay, wisdom arises as a gift from the openness. So your wisdom potential, for example, is an open heart. You're witnessing and developing the wisdom to recognize who has the will to prove themselves, who has the ability to deliver, to support, to convince, to persuade, to empower, to control, to implement. Who has the wisdom to make and keep promises that are healthy, that are correct, that are aligned? Who has that? Who out there? Okay, it's not about you trying to prove anything. You got a free pass this life. So what happens in the conditioning receptor when you have a gate activation that's there? You have a dormant potential, okay? Dormant potential is what we call these conditioning receptors, where that gate activation in the undefined function is like a tuning fork. It's standing there in the doorway, in this example, of the head center, holding an outstretched hand. Maybe this is your unconscious moon, so it's your unconscious driving force. Maybe this is your conscious Venus or Mars or Mercury, and that's how you're here, to reach out to the other and provide that integrity of awareness. Here's the pressure to be aware. Here's the pressure to realize and to recognize, okay? So to make the availability of a stream of awareness possible. We are all aspects, unique, individuated aspects that are designed to partner and align to specific others through specific timing, and that's how we learn and grow together as a species. So one of the things I want to invite you to do, if you can get your body graph, whenever you take classes of me, always have your body graph in front of you if you're a generator. If you're a reflector, have your body graph, absolutely. And anybody else in your life, if you're a manifester, have your body graph, absolutely. And anybody else in your life, and especially my projector friends, make sure you got all your peeps that you interact with physically, especially. So I want you to do a little quantum absorption exercise with me. This is Ra's graph, so I just have him up as an example. If you could just soft gaze. Some of us have a very focused perspective. We're very focused on things. Some of us have a peripheral perspective. So it depends on how you're designed, whether or not this is going to land with you. But this is just my invitation to experiment. You might do this now. You might do this down the road. But I want you to look at your body graph, really look at your body graph and see how at the center of that body graph, that diamond at the center of being, colored in yellow, maybe it's not, whatever the case may be, that diamond at the center of being is your higher self. When your higher self is defined, this is part of the light you shine in the world. When your higher self is undefined, this is where you're receptive to aligning the other higher selves in the world. So that magnetic monopole, all of us have it. That gate 2, you can see that Ra had it as part of where he's here to fulfill his purpose. That gate 2 is what is holding together everything on the right-hand side with everything on the left-hand side in this illusion of us being a separate being from the totality of existence, because we are embodiment. We are embodied. We are consciousness in form. So as you soft gaze at your body graph, don't see anything as missing or lacking or broken. All you need to see is consistency or not. Individuated, unique activation to energy and awareness and identity and conversation and communication or not. None of it is broken. None of it needs to be fixed. It's all exactly perfect for you. And what might have happened when you were a child, imagine yourself as a child right now. Do you remember being a child and being scolded for something that you naturally did? Your behavior, your imagination, your fantasies, your answers, your explanations, whatever it happens to be. Do you remember being scolded? Most of the time, people look at our difference and go, what the hell's wrong with you? Why are you such an asshole, Ra? Or why are you so mean and selfish and self-absorbed? Why are you so prickly? What's wrong with you? Well, you know, out of integrity and out of alignment, these things definitely show up a lot more rough around the edges. And strategy and authority is the way that we can align to our form, that aligns us to the monopole and its trajectory as it moves in space. Instead of trying to go off into left field, we're able to attune to the direction of our unique genetic potential. So what I want to invite you to do is never, ever, ever look at your body graph and wish that it were different. And naturally, as an occurrence of you living your design, you're going to find that at some point you surrender, you let go of the wish I had and should be, might be, could be, would be, and you surrender to the form and you love exactly what you have, exactly as it is. And no matter what lessons life brings you, you get to see the beauty and the magic and the wonderment of us living in alignment, even though the form suffers and dies as far as its process of development and growth. That is what this world currently in its conditioned state happens to be about, even though we are all human and we all make mistakes and we all have learnings and wisdom's potentials and growths and insecurities and fears. Even through the fear, you can surrender to being present, to being a witness, to being alive and awake and aware. That's all awakeness is being self-aware and loving yourself as you are. So remember, with your unconditioned, your undefined, undefined centers, there's a chain reaction that happens. And what the Human Design System experiment will help you do is, because you are in the openness, amplifying because you're receptive and you're taking things in, what you can find if you align to your decision-making strategy, there's a correct focus instead of being distorted and distracted. And if you can align to your decision-making strategy, you can observe without evaluation, good, bad, right, wrong, instead of being overreactive, perhaps emotionally, perhaps knee-jerk response, what have you, of not being able to be present in the moment and overreacting out of fear. And that fear leads to misunderstanding and anger and bitterness and disappointment. If you can just insert the thematic of whatever your decision-making strategy and authority happens to be before you get to that point of misunderstanding, your wisdom potential through correct awareness begins to develop. And that wisdom potential is very specific to very specific people and situations. It's not, oh, everybody needs to do this. It's, oh, in that situation, I had this experience and here's what I learned. What's it like for you? If you can develop the wisdom potential through your decision-making strategy, you will see how your life lights up. There we go. Your life lights up. Now, as we go through this program, I'm going to talk to you about the crystals of consciousness, the personality crystal, the design crystal, the magnetic monopole, deeper, though, than what we looked at in ABC. Your personality is affiliated with our self-reflected consciousness, the ability to reflect upon being available to ride around on this vehicle in this form, self-reflected consciousness. Design crystal and the magnetic monopole are of the earth. They are what incarnates once and what has one life to live. And then they recycle. They are evolved in the next incarnation. They are not the eternal soul, which is what your personality crystal is. The you that was you before time was time is that personality crystal, the soul. The evolutionary movement of us fractalizing away from each other and learning and sharing and growing together. So life's illusion is created by that magnetic monopole that holds these two together as we fly through space. And the thing that is, especially for those of you who are undefined in the G, the thing that you're longing for, the thing that you're searching for and seeking, it's within you already. The unconditional love, the unity of the monopole and the design crystal, they are actually one thing. And when they separated, when the body started being built, their unconditional love of each other separated and started building the body. And this personality crystal is what is here to witness the body in its life. We're the aliens, as Ra would say. It's not our life, it's the body. The body is the life. So, in order to grok or grasp this, it's important that we surrender to the form. You are your own authority. You are here to not answer to anybody else, not to make up excuses. You don't have to prove, justify, rationalize any of your decisions. Whatever is correct for you is right for you. And if you can unapologetically follow your gut response no matter what, if you can align to the integrity of your form, your authenticity, your awareness, correct boundaries, correct interaction, what's going to happen is that your mind will begin to lighten up, because it's not so burdened by trying to make decisions and then trying to convince you that it knows the way, trying to help you in your mind's process. It's so funny, you helping you. It's kind of like all of us, when we're not awake and aware, live under this illusion and delusion of being identified with something that is not consistent, the openness, the undefined areas of our body graph where we have no consistency. And it's a very special case with reflectors, by the way. We'll talk about in the type discussion. But if you can let go of that psychoticness, I don't mean to say it in a bad way or a negative way, a lot of people are identified with the voice, the mind. It says, I am this, and then you think that you are that, when it's just transits. It's just energetic receptivity and awareness floating by that is not consistent within you. So your wisdom potential begins with what is personally correct for you. What nourishes you is in the openness. Our design is correctly nourished. For me, as a design with an undefined heart center that has an activated or undefined a dormant potential 21 that gets activated when I'm in control of a larger group. Somebody gives over control for me to implement stuff. When I am in control, I am correctly nourished, because that's my Venus. That's what I'm designed to be wise about. So the correct conditioning nourishes you. It helps us make the right connections. It helps us have the connection to our global human organism in right timing, with right awareness, with correct aligned action. Your mind controls you when you're not awake and you have no idea. In the slide presentation, you'll be able to click on this article if you like, The Not Self, who's really in charge of your life. It talks more about the awarenesses that I came to in my process of experimenting with this. And there's another concept that I heard from Alakanan Diaz. I worked with him for a while in my education, and also have met with him one-on-one. And he's been very impactful in my life. And one of the terms he used was called not self-generosity. So we have to look for that, watch for that. There's another article you could read so that you're aware of what's happening to you in the openness and when you get conditioned. All right. Bye for now.